Hello and welcome to The Print. This is Sourav Barman. Joining us today is Mr. Shankar Aiyar, former Union Minister, whose autobiography, Memoir of a Maverick, is hitting the stands today. Mr. Aiyar had a long career as a diplomat, following which he joined the PMO of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, where he had a 4-year long stint. After that, he moved to politics. Welcome, Mr. Aiyar.
Thank you.
I before we go to the book, I pulled out a line from a piece you wrote yesterday for the Hindu, where you quoted your daughter as having written that this particular autobiography captures the fact that you are partly humble, you are partly arrogant.
In fact, she reversed it. She said partly arrogant and partly humble. I think it's an accurate description of me. I have a tendency to be arrogant, and I'm very glad that she spotted that I compensate that by being humble from time to time.
So you clearly endorse that assessment.
Oh, yes, my daughters are always right, particularly about me.
So I'll skip a few chapters in the book and I'll go straight to the chapter on your Rajiv years, where
Oh, that's a pity.
I'll
Because
come back.
most of the book is about me.
I'll come back to that, sir.
Okay.
In those chapters, you deal with certain subjects which you'll be dealing with in a more comprehensive manner in the companion volume. To name a few, you write about the Shah Bano judgment, the unlocking of the gates of the Babri Masjid, and the Bofors controversy. There is a particular line in that chapter where you say how Mr. Rajiv Gandhi opened the door to the majoritarianism and authoritarianism which is being inflicted on the nation today. In a way,
Not Rajiv Gandhi. I've said that the opposition to Rajiv Gandhi opened the way to all this. So you've completely misunderstood that line.
Okay. But
And I explained why. Maybe that's where we should start. I opened it by saying that the opposition to Rajiv Gandhi on Shah Bano brought the liberals and the left along with the Hindu extreme right, and that is what has led to the authoritarianism of with a religious bias that we see today, because that joining of forces in the national front and then the understanding with the BJP is what opened the door to the Modi era through which we are going. So I hope you've understood that.
But you did mention that, sir, initially the plan was for Mr. Gandhi to go to the elections with the plank of Panchayati Raj,
That's
the
right.
reforms he was bringing.
Yes.
Although later he actually allowed certain people in the party to make Babri Ayodhya the main plank. Was that a mistake?
I've said so in my book. I in fact told Rajiv Gandhi, who had given me a book about Margaret Thatcher's election campaign after the Falklands War by a man called Rodney Taylor. It's called Campaign with an exclamation mark. And he had a very wise line there that no political party should fight an election on somebody else's issue. So I tried to dissuade him from taking up the Babri Masjid as the main issue and to stick to his 2-year-old resolve to make Panchayati Raj the main issue. But others prevailed and he went along with them. And the result was that he fell from over 400 seats to below 200 seats.
So throughout the course of the book, you repeatedly try to make a point that you were not really a part of the so-called Rajiv Gandhi coterie.
I never was. No, I didn't say that. What I said was that on political matters and many policy matters, I was in no way a confidant of Rajiv Gandhi. The impression that people had was that I was a kind of close advisor to him. And this was because I used to be with him when he traveled, either in India or abroad, and at various public functions. So, television at that stage, which was mostly state television, would often show me. And this gave people the impression that I was some kind of right hand man of Rajiv Gandhi. And what I've attempted to show through this book is that because I was neither a witness nor consulted on these major political issues, what I had have to say about Rajiv Gandhi as a prime minister, as a misunderstood prime minister, is largely in the companion volume called The Rajiv I Knew and Why He Was India's Most Misunderstood Prime Minister, is coming in a few months from now. So I did request people like you who were going to interview me to postpone your questions on Shah Bano, Bofas, etc. to the next book. But of course, you have your job to do, and your job is to ask me questions, and I'll give you the answers.
You know, very naturally, the moment excerpts of the book started coming out in the newspapers, yesterday we have seen reactions pouring in. Yesterday we saw columnist Tableen Singh, right, for the Sunday Express. Tableen Singh,
Yeah,
she wrote a piece for the Sunday Express where she described you as the as part of Rajiv's quote unquote darbar. You think,
that's
would you?
Tavlini's,
Yes.
that's not the truth. She's also said I told lies about her. I've said I credited her with suggesting that Rajiv Gandhi should go to Bangladesh to look after the typhoon victims. So I don't know where the lies come in. But anyway, Tavleen Singh, I have described her in the book as she of the quill dipped in hemlock. And she has proved that she does have her quill dipped in hemlock. And she's also shown that she is a serpent with a forked tongue, which spits a lot of poison. So why should we talk about her? We're talking about my book.
So if we go back to the beginning of the book, where you write about your upbringing and the instances of marital discord in the family between your mother and father, which you very
The
bravely.
only marital discord usually refers to me and my wife, but she and I have been happily married. At least I have been happily
In the
married
case of your
for
parents,
more than 50 years. But yeah, my parents had considerable marital discord.
and in what ways has that had some impact in your life?
Well, it had a major impact. My mother told me just before I got married that somebody had told her watching my parents, I would either make a very bad husband or a very good husband, that there was no way it would fall in the middle. And so I was so upset by what I saw when I was a young boy that I initially determined I wouldn't get married. Then I met Sunit and I knew I had to marry her. And I have attempted as best as I can to be a good husband on the principle that every good marriage requires one spouse and one mouse. And I'm happy to play the role of the mouse.
So you were among the proudest alumni of Doon School, and
I don't know. So anyway, continue.
which comes out through the book. Where you
No, I
also.
think I think you should make a distinction. I'm very proud of the school I went to, but at the same time, I'm extremely critical of it. So I have asked myself the question in the book as to why is it that most of us who went to Doon School have really rotten memories of our adolescence there and of the bullying and all that took place. So I do ask the question, why is it then that in retrospect we have so much nostalgia about the school? And I've tried to explain that by saying it's because 5 years in a boarding school, like the Doon School, creates a sense of community. It creates new loyalties that you learn to live with the bad, because there's a lot of good into it. And it was also because our masters were superb, absolutely superb. They were led by a team of two Englishmen who made a very profound impression on our minds. And the Indians who joined them, as well as one gentleman from Sri Lanka, they were so good. And then H.D. Bhatt, my Hindi teacher, I've, I'm able to speak a fair amount of Hindi largely because of H.D. Bhatt, who was otherwise the butt of everybody's jokes. So maybe we should spell H.D. Bhatt as B-U-T-T rather than B-H-A-T-T. And I regret that. But we also had perhaps the most influential thing that the school gave us was the assembly, morning assembly, the prayer meeting. The prayers were completely non denominational, that we were read little bits from different religions, but it was not in the shape of scripture so much as in the shape of poetry. So we learnt Allama Iqbal, we learnt Kabir, we learnt Rabindranath Tagore. We also learnt, I think we learnt one or two hymns, but it gave us a secular outlook and a sense of being Indian. And for me, that was very important because I had a confused identity. I am the smallest minority in India. Why do I say that? Because I am a Tamil Brahmin refugee from Pakistan. How many can you name who are that category? So I needed to be reassured that I could be a Tamilian, that I could be from south of the Hindi heartland, that I could be an atheist as I was, that I could live in a very religious household led by my mother, who was a spiritual follower of Swami Shivanand, whom I didn't like at all. And she was very nasty about other sects of Hindus, but she was extremely tolerant.
Your mother was nasty about other sects of Hindus.
Yeah, that is to say, she'd say, "Oh, this is their practice." I've given instances
Right.
of that. That when she came to my engagement ceremony, after I'd begged her not to come, she sat for a few minutes and then walked out. So when I asked her, "Why did you walk out?" She said, "Oh, among us, that is Tamil Brahmins, you only cover your head at a funeral. So I came to my eldest son's wedding, and I found that I was at a funeral." Now, what rubbish is this? But at the same time, she would very happily say, "It is odd, isn't it, that so many of your friends are Muslims?" And she never discriminated on the basis of religion. So I'd written a previous book called Confessions of a Secular Fundamentalist, which I've dedicated to my mother, saying religious and secular. And I've quoted there a letter written by Jawaharlal Nehru in prison to Mahatma Gandhi, in which he said that it is easy for people like Sapru and me, who have little religion, to be tolerant. But you who are filled with a spiritual, uh, being a spiritual person, that you are so tolerant of other religions, that is true secularism.
You mentioned your previous
And we were
book.
taught that at
Mm,
school.
mm.
We were also taught the dignity of labor. We were also exposed to nature in our midterm hikes. So, therefore, we carry nostalgia, but it's combined with a memory of some very terrible days spent in the school.
Since you mentioned your previous book, The Confessions of a Secular Fundamentalist, the book is essentially an outcome of certain questions that the Congress party was grappling
That's
with
right.
back
Yeah.
then. But eventually they ended up discarding those, and you turned it into a book.
That's all given. Is it given in this book? No, it is given
It
here.
is. It is.
Yeah, that was my first searing experience in the Congress. It happened about 3 months after, or 4 months after I'd left the Foreign Service and joined the Congress Party. Rajiv Gandhi decided on a convention against communalism in Talkatora Stadium with about 6,000 AICC
Delegates.
participants. And he asked MJ Akbar and me to write the conference paper, the theme paper. But he said to us, go and meet Narasimha Rao before you do so. And when both Akbar and I went to see Narasimha Rao, he had Mr. Gadgil with him. And they said, what's all this rubbish you're talking about? These are all cliches. There are many questions that we have been asked in the election. He had stood from Ramtek and won by a small margin. As far as Gadgil was concerned, it stood in Pune and he'd lost. So they started throwing these questions at us. So I took them down. There were questions like, why do you have a Hajj subsidy? Why is there no hostel? Why is there a Hajj Manzil in Bombay, but no Dham in Gorakhpur for those wanting to visit the Pashupatinath Kovil temple in Kathmandu, and so on and so forth. So I took down the questions, and I said, sir, I'll come back with the answers. And I wrote them out. And then I wrote them out and took them back to Narasimha Rao. He said, is this the Congress view? I said, I don't know. I brought it to you. He said, take it away. And therefore, we held the convention without a theme paper. And yet, following the convention, Rajiv Gandhi embarked on his Sadbhavna Yatra. And that was a real demonstration on the ground of commitment to secularism. So it was a confusing period. But when many years later, I was on my, not many years later, 2 years later, I was on my Ram Rahim Yatra from Rameshwaram to Ayodhya. In the middle of it, when I reached Orissa, I was called back to Delhi by the Prime Minister, who by then was Mr. Narasimha Rao. And he said to me, I have nothing to say about your yatra, but I do have a serious question about your definition of secularism. So I said, sir, what's wrong with my definition of secularism? He says, Mani, you don't seem to understand that we are a Hindu country. I looked at him astonished. I said, but that's what the BJP says. We say we are a secular country. So then I knew that, or I began to guess, that he was very inclined towards the BJP view on the Babri Masjid. And of course, the Babri Masjid fell. He was completely silent about it. And my comment on that was, he has proved that death is not a necessary precondition for rigor mortis to set in. That's in my book.
In a way,
that's in my next volume.
Yeah. You do not say it in as many words, but in a way, you are holding Narasimha Rao singularly responsible for the demolition of Babri Masjid.
He was singularly responsible for pulling the Congress away from its secular moorings. In Nirja Chowdhury's book, the justification has been given that if the Babri Masjid were to be destroyed, then Narasimha Rao believed that it would be extinguished as an issue. He's obviously wrong in that estimation, if in fact that was his estimation. I didn't hear that from him. But it was under Narasimha Rao that the Congress started separating itself from its strong anchoring in the secularism of the Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru kind of secularism.
The kind of questions that that particular exercise undertaken by Rajiv Gandhi had thrown up, which you tried to address in your book, are the same set of questions that the Congress party is still trying to answer.
Yeah.
And what does it say about the state of the party?
Well, what it says is that there are pragmatists at the party. There always have been. Please don't imagine that this is a contemporary phenomenon. If you look back at the history of the freedom struggle, we had on the one hand Madan Mohan Malviya, who was simultaneously, with being a member of the Congress, the president of the Hindu Mahasabha. And we had Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who simultaneously, with being a congressman, was a leading member of the Muslim League. So the freedom movement, led by the Indian National Congress, was a kind of banyan tree under which people of different persuasions could come in with the objective of freeing us from the shackles of British colonialism. And after independence, as I think I've mentioned in my book, Purushottam Das Tandon became the president of the Congress. And Nehru had a very difficult time ousting him because there's always been this soft Hindutva line within the Congress. And that is playing out again now because pragmatically, there are problems in elections with taking a secular fundamentalist line. On the other hand, in my view, unless the Congress party presents a clear ideological opposition or alternative to Hindutva, people will get confused. And when they're confused, the tendency would be to go in the direction of the BJP, which means that tactically as well as strategically, it's better to put forward a completely secular image than to play around with the kind of politics that the Sangh Parivar is showing.
Sir, you also write about your election campaign, your first election campaign, where you had to portray yourself as a false Brahmin. So, could you please talk about that?
I don't think I was portraying myself as a false Brahmin.
Mm.
I am a false Brahmin. I became an atheist at the age of 15, and I never believed in the caste system. I've always thought it is a terrible system. And therefore, long before my campaign actually started, on an early visit to what was to become my constituency, I was addressing a meeting on secularism on behalf of my Society for Secularism. And I could see that there was a DMK lady who was taking down notes furiously. And as anticipated, she raised her hand at question time. And she said to me, with your surname, how dare you call yourself secular? So sometimes spontaneity comes to one's rescue. I said to her that the first time my name came in the newspapers was when I stood first in Delhi University. And at that time, if I had not added Aiyar to my name, the credit would have gone entirely to Uttar Pradesh because Mani Shankar is a common name there. I said the credit came to Tamil Nadu only because an Aiyar was attached. So that is an identification, a label of identification of me as a Tamilian, not of me as a Brahmin.
Now, this is a topic or theme you will probably deal with in your next book, but you do sign off by writing about how you find yourself sidelined in the Congress party by the heirs of Mr. Nehru or
That's a
Rajiv.
reality
Hmm.
and has just been confirmed by my not being included in the Congress Working Committee in the rejig that took place yesterday. So I now know that the Congress party thinks I'm yesterday's man. They respect me. After all, Mrs. Sonia Gandhi has this morning confirmed that she's going to be at my book launch. That's a great compliment. But it is obvious that the party leadership, by which I mean not only the Gandhi family, but also the president, Mr. Kharge, and his close advisors, including people like Jairam Ramesh, either believe or want to believe that I am a dinosaur, that my year is over, and that the best thing they can do is to keep me on the sidelines I accept that. What can I do? I said in a previous interview before the CWC was constituted that I had been sent back to the pavilion, but I was padded up and ready to go into bat.
We're expecting to be inducted into this.
I expected it, but it hasn't happened. So what should I do? I've just taken off my pads. I've returned my bat, but I haven't returned my pen and I haven't returned my tongue. So I will continue to be a member of this party. I have no intention of defecting, even if I'm not given any recognition inside of it. I'm not going to defect. And I think the main reason I've been sidelined is that I'm regarded as a loose cannon. Well, they've just cut the chain on the loose cannon. So I'm going to be even more of a loose cannon. And it's actually freeing me. So I'll continue to write, I'll continue to speak, and I will never leave the Congress party. But I don't know whether the Congress party will leave me. We'll have to see. Maybe I can end this interview by reading the last two sentences of this book, My Memoirs of a Maverick. The lines are, which go, my life in politics rose in spurts to its highs and then spluttered out to the point where I find myself sidelined by Rajiv Gandhi's heirs and marginalized even in the party. But that is another story for another book.